have a hyper chihuahua that just won't calm down? Maybe your cat has been taking a few too many naps and the pounds are really starting to add up. Whether it's dogs, cats, birds, or reptiles, we are talking anything and everything pets. If you have pet questions, give us a call at 702-258-3552. Maybe you're thinking of bringing home a furry friend for the holidays, or your canine has developed a strange cough. Is there a secret to getting your pet to stop stealing food from the table? Whatever your question, we have a panel of pet experts ready to share some answers. Again, the number today is 702-258-3552. That's 702-258-3552. You can send us an email at son@knpr.org. On Twitter, we're at KNPR News, and Facebook is Nevada Public Radio. You'll hear us inviting calls during tonight's State of Nevada program, but this is a rebroadcast from earlier today, so we will not be taking calls tonight. But you can add to the conversation by emailing us at son@knpr.org. The holidays can be a great time of year to adopt unwanted pets from the shelters, but rescue and welfare groups find pets adopted as presents for the holidays typically make their ways back into the shelter. Christy Deneff is Director of Life-Saving Programs at the Animal Foundation, which operates the public shelter for Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and Clark County Animal Control. Christy, welcome back to State of Nevada.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Well, Christy, while a new pet may seem like the perfect holiday gift for your loved ones, the unfortunate truth is that sometimes they're not often kept. Why is that typically the case and what happens?
Well, the really interesting thing is that while a lot of people fear that that is the case, the research actually shows us that that's not actually true. People who get pets as gifts don't feel any less attached to the animals that they receive as gifts, and they're actually less likely to come back to the shelter if they were received as gifts. So for many years, us at shelters and rescue groups thought that that was a danger, but we're really, really happy to report that the data just doesn't support that, and we're really excited to get animals into homes, whether that be straight-up adoptions, gift adoptions, or even fostering for the holidays.
Wow, well, that's really exciting news to hear. We're currently in the pre-holiday season, and I'm curious, how many adoptable animals are there currently at the Animal Foundation?
We currently have about 300 animals available for adoption, but new animals come in every single day. So that number is going to be staying probably pretty near to that every single day. And if you don't find what you're looking for today, you never know who might be walking in the door to be available for adoption tomorrow.
And of these 300 animals, are we primarily talking cats and dogs, or are there some other strange mixes that are in that number?
We do have a lot of cats and dogs, and that's usually what people think of when they come to adopt animals from the shelter. But we are an open admission shelter. We never know what kind of animals might be walking in the door, so we often have many other kinds of animals available for adoption. Right now we have a lot of rabbits available for adoption, guinea pigs, reptiles, really whatever you're looking for, you can definitely find it at a shelter for adoption.
Now, talk to me kind of about the adoption process. If I were to come in after the show today and wanted to adopt a furry friend for myself, what would I be going through to try and obtain a forever home friend?
So we are open every day from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. for adoptions. We're open for walk-ins, so anyone can come on down, take a look through our adoptable animals, visit with some of them if they're interested in meeting them, learning more about them. And then our adoption counselors will really help them learn more about that animal and really provide the support and resources and guidance that adopters will need to set them up and those pets up for success in the home. We are really, really large supporters of what we call open adoptions. That means we don't want to put up any barriers to adoption at all. We want to make sure that we are providing, if it's guidance about how to integrate that family and pet together, what they might need to know to care for a pet. We really want to make adoptions work and set those animals up for success. So in speaking with that adoption counselor, they'll provide the guidance that adopters need to, take that animal home, set them up for success from day one, and then fill out the paperwork, sign the documents, and send them on home with their lovely new family pet.
Wow. Now, I do want to ask because I think that sometimes people who come into the shelters and might think that they'd make a good family for a pet, sometimes it's not always the case. They might be too busy and gone throughout the day, or maybe they really just don't have the time to care for the animal that they think they do. Is that something the adoption counselors are going to really talk about so that way, that person is making an informed decision?
Yes, that's definitely something that people want to think about when they think about adopting. And it's also the things that our adoption counselors can help them with. So really assessing, what is your schedule like? What sort of effort do you want to put into this animal? What sort of schedule, what does your schedule look like about how you're going to work with that animal? What sort of things would make you happy with your relationship with your animal? And then we can really find the right matches, just the right perfect matches for each individual family and each individual animal.
Now, I do want to ask, a lot of the animals that you do receive at the Animal Foundation, can you tell us a little bit about where they're coming from? What's the typical story behind why they end up there?
So animals come to us all sorts of different ways. Many of them come to us as strays, and so we don't know very much about their background. We do put a lot of effort into making sure that we are gathering as much information, historical information about any animal that comes to us as we can possibly get, and then collect as much information about our interactions with those animals in the shelter to make sure that we can share that with potential adopters, again, so that they know as much information as we know about those animals, so that they can make the right decision for that animal and that family. Other than that, we do get animals through, maybe families that do need to surrender their animals. Of course, we pass no judgment on that. We totally understand that people have situations in their lives where they may no longer be able to keep an animal in their home. And we want to make sure that they feel very comfortable coming to us. And again, we want to collect all that information about that animal so that we can set that animal up for success with a new family. So we want to make sure, again, that we have as much information as we can about those animals.
Now, Christy, I do want to jump back really quickly to the idea of pets as presents. Although you may not be seeing that return rate or maybe animals coming back like they used to, are there still things that we should be wary of when it comes to maybe getting a gift for someone else for the holidays?
Sure. Basically, all of the same things that you should consider in just a straight up adoption of a pet is something that should be considered when you're thinking about giving someone a pet animal as well. So the things like, just make sure that person is interested in having a pet. That's probably a good thing to think about before you give them a pet for Christmas. What sort of schedule do they have? What type of lifestyle do they lead? So that you can, again, try to make sure that you're getting the right match for them. Again, our counselors can help through that process as well.
We're talking about pets with Christy Deneth of the Animal Foundation, and we want to hear from you. Have you ever been given a pet as a Christmas present? And how did that turn out? Maybe you have questions about leaving your animals at home or in boarding houses during the holiday travel season. And what does it mean if your dog or cat starts coughing? Now, our phone lines are starting to light up, and I do actually want to bring on our next guest who's going to be joining us. That is Dr. Shadi Arefij. He's a veterinarian and the founder of vettriage.com. Dr. Arefij, welcome back to State of Nevada.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back on. And Chrissy, great work. Thank you so much for doing what you do every day.
Oh, thank you.
Now, doctor, in Nevada, we rarely get snow and we'll have temperatures in the low 30s. However, I'm curious, is it still possible for our pets to get hypothermia or other weather-related illnesses here?
Absolutely. It's going to depend somewhat on the breed. Obviously, those dogs that are more thick-coated are more resilient to the cold. In fact, they probably prefer the cold. Those that have shorter hairs, thinner hairs, like your Chihuahuas, they are going to be more prone to having hypothermia. Plus, if they're tinier, they tend to lose heat fairly quickly. So you still want to protect them against hypothermia. That being said, you also don't want to prophylactically, or I guess, treat without diagnosis. So if you do have a pet that's in trouble and you suspect a weather-related issue, either hypothermia or hyperthermia, very important to always consult with the veterinarian before you start implementing treatment, because if the diagnosis is incorrect, you're going to be in even more trouble than you currently are. So it is very important to look into what the weather is like, what kind of breed do you have, and then dress them up accordingly for the cold temperatures.
Now, doctor, tell me about some of the other seasonal sicknesses or illnesses pets might experience during the fall and winter months.
Well, as you mentioned, colder weather it can be a problem. Frostbite, for example, if they're outside for an extended period of time in the cold, the tips of their tails, their tips of their ears, those are extremity points that are more prone to low body temperature related injury because of the poor blood supply to those areas. And so cold will vasoconstrict, which means the blood vessels will close up, and that's when you end up risking that. If you're looking in terms of toxicities, as weather changes, we have different plants that'll grow in certain weather, and so some plants are toxic, either mild or very severe in animals, and so you want to make sure that you keep their exposure to plants at a minimum as well. And so those are two fairly good examples. Also, if you do tend to go hiking with your dog, you want to look at the terrain. Is it slippery outside, or is the ground fairly rough? Not every dog can handle that type of terrain with their paw pads, or if they slip and fall, that's also a problem. And so those also can be related to the weather as well.
I'd like to bring on Scott from Las Vegas, who has a question about an obese cat. Scott, welcome.
Hey, hi.
Hi, good morning.
I have good morning. I have two cats. They're sisters. They're tuxedo cats, short hair. And one is obese and one isn't. I'm feeding them IAMS weight control with hairball control, too. The one that's overweight, when he comes down off his cat tree, every time he does it, he comes down and then he's like heaving a hairball, but it's not coming out. So my two questions is what can I do about, should I be concerned about her with the hairball every time, or and am I feeding the right food for weight loss?
Dr. Rayfidge, what are your thoughts?
First, that's great, Scott, that you have biological sister cats. It's not that common that we get to see pet owners who adopt more than one from the same litter. So that's fantastic. A couple points there. One is if you have one cat that's overweight and the other is not, or maybe even on the thin side, just make sure that the overweight cat is not stealing the other one's food. And so that's an easy trial by just feeding them separately for a good month or two and see if that makes a difference with weight gain or weight loss. Secondly, in regards to the type of diet, there are prescription diets that you can get from your veterinarian. Like, for example, Hills is a pet food company that makes WD. The W is for weight. And one of the aspects to that as well is not just changing the diet, which usually means less caloric intake, but perhaps we can increase the metabolism by feeding them small amounts frequently. So if you have the type of schedule, or if you have a feeder that's on a timer where you can feed them the same total amount per day, but it divides it up into smaller meals, that may help over time speed up their metabolism. There are other things you can do, of course, like promoting activity level at home in the form of basic physical therapy. Let's say if you have a laser pointer and you make the cats run around, that helps too. In regard to the hairball, we do see that problem more so with cats that have longer hair because of the grooming, but also what you can consider doing is try to find ways to help with digestion as well as help with the quality of the hair. So, for example, if you can add a fish oil supplement to their diet, let's say twice a day, it'll make the hair a lot softer, so hopefully easier to digest. And we do know that omega supplementation, omega fatty acid supplementation helps with digestion as well. So those are some pointers that you can implement that are fairly safe and effective.
Scott, I hope that answers your question. Today we are talking to Christy Deneff. She is the Director of Life-Saving Programs at the Animal Foundation. We also have Dr. Shadi Arefij. He's a veterinarian and the owner of Vet Triage. And now I'd like to introduce Gregory. He is a master dog trainer with more than 25 years experience, and he operates the Dog Training Center. Master Gregory, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Of course. You know, with that much experience behind your belt, I'm sure that you get a lot of questions about behaviors and training. What do people normally seek out when they come to you?
Well, because dogs run so differently, just like people, it could be a variety of things from trying to get a behavior changed or modified to working on particular things like obedience or service dog training or even protection dog training.
Wow. Now, I'm curious, for someone who might be thinking about adopting a dog, when's the best time for owners to start considering training for their animals?
Well, I have an expression that goes, always be training, ABT. In other words, you're always training with your dog, just as you're always parenting when you decide to have a child. One of the major mistakes that we can make is the belief that it is something that waits or we don't invest in it immediately. So just as when you have a child, you're always parenting, but you're parenting for the particular stage that that child is in, the same thing happens with dogs. You're trying to set schedules. You're trying to get the dog on a routine. You're trying to do everything you can to help the dog fit into the new household, regardless of whether that dog is a puppy of 8 weeks that you just got from the breeder or from a pet store, or whether that dog is an older dog that you've adopted from maybe a shelter or even picked up from a previous owner.
You'll hear us inviting calls during tonight's State of Nevada program, but this is a rebroadcast from earlier today, so we will not be taking calls tonight. But you can add to the conversation by emailing us at son@knpr.org. Now I want to turn the conversation to Andrea. She's from Las Vegas, and she has found some rabbits. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Yes. We live in a golf course community and have a garden in the backyard. And all of a sudden, we didn't have a garden in the backyard. We couldn't figure out why until we found a domestic bunny in our backyard. And we've taken him in. He's been in our house since August. Our kids love him. We love him most of the time. He's a little destructive. So we're trying to remedy that. But he does still seem a little bit scared of us. And I don't know if that's something that is going to continue. But I figured now he'd be a little more settled. So I don't know if there's any tips or anything that maybe somebody can give us as far as like kind of making him a little more comfortable.
Yeah. Dr. Arefij, I want to turn this question over to you. Bunnies and kind of being scared in a new home. What are your thoughts?
There's definitely a difference in behavior between domesticated bunnies and wild bunnies. And rabbits are naturally prey animals, so they're always on high alert. They're naturally just terrified of things because they're always the prey and rarely the predator. So it may be something that's inherently embedded in that bunny's genetics, and you may not be able to change it. Having said that, you never know. And so if your family is willing to be patient, give the bunny time, and most importantly, understand that this type of emergency response, let's say the fight or flight response that's embedded in their genetics, is going to take time and maybe will never get better, then give it time and see what happens. You never know. These days we see so many amazing videos on social media with animals doing things we never thought they would do. So be patient, try to be understanding, really keep the environment as stress-free as possible, and you never know what will happen. But there is a strong possibility that a wild bunny's behavior will never change.
And Christy Deneff with the Animal Foundation, you mentioned earlier that you guys do have bunnies in your care as well. I wonder if this is a common occurrence that you've heard of.
It's pretty common that rabbits specifically take a little bit of time to adjust to new homes. So I would definitely make sort of the same recommendations. about being patient and giving that time and really trying to build those trusting relationships with rabbits specifically. But it's true whether they came from, your backyard or whether they came from the shelter. You might not know what their exact background is, and they're definitely going to need a little bit of understanding as they settle in, for sure.
Well, I hope that answers your question, Andrea. I want to turn the conversation over to Tracy now from Las Vegas. She has a dog from an animal shelter. Tracy, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you.
Good morning. What's your question?
So I actually got a dog for my mom, a companion pet. So that was a good instance in which you give a pet as a gift. She loves the dog. But the dog will not eat any dog food whatsoever and barely eats any human food. So we were really concerned about her, eating whatsoever and also about eating nutritiously. So what can we do to help adapt the dog?
Yeah, that sounds like a problem. Dr. Rafage, what are your thoughts?
This is a common scenario, and I'm just not sure we fully understand why most dogs thoroughly enjoy and look forward to food, but there's a small number that seem to just not be great eaters. And so my first answer is maybe a dog is just a poor eater, and then it is normal and okay for that dog's metabolism. Secondly, not to sound cruel, but at some point they get hungry enough where they're going to eventually eat. So what I would suggest is if you pick a diet that's a well-rounded adult canine diet and just keep offering that food day in, day out, at some point they're going to eventually eat it. That being said, if you're pretty savvy in the kitchen and you want to look into a well-balanced homemade meal that you can make at home for your dog too, that way you at least know you're giving them fresh food every single day, and then the same rules apply. Keep offering it, and eventually they'll want to eat it. And then at some point you'll be successful. They're not going to let themselves starve, and some dogs are just poor eaters to begin with. But those are some helpful hints that I hope can help remedy the situation.
I hope that answers your question, Tracy. We are talking anything and everything pets, from adoptions to understanding obedience and health problems and more. I do have a question from a Darius from Las Vegas. He says, I have a German Shepherd puppy that likes to bite. What do I do about that? Dog Master Gregory, what are your thoughts?
The first thing that I would want to know if you were to call me would be what is the age of the puppy. But it is not unusual for puppies to want to bite. That is something that they do to express themselves in so many different ways, playing, etc. The best thing I can recommend, based on the limited feedback that I'm getting right now over the radio, is make sure that you're trying to control the puppy's environment, and you're trying to control the puppy when he's out of the crate, when he's not in the yard. Keep your puppy on a leash as much as possible. Everywhere you go, take the puppy with you. Have the puppy follow you, and start controlling the puppy in that respect. And they start to realize that they have a responsibility to you and not the other way around. And once you start to exert that control, then you'll find usually that they'll start to become more passive in how they deal with you. The other thing is that if it becomes a situation that the puppy you believe is starting to bite out of aggression, please get the help of a professional trainer, preferably one that has background in working with dogs like Dobermans, German Shepherds, etc.
And then I have another question for you. The question is, what is the secret to raising a well-trained pet that also retains its personality?
Well, the challenge is so many people look at dogs as being cookie cutters, as if they're all the same. So what it takes to raise a well-trained pet could be different in every household and every dog. Basically, when we train dogs, what we're doing is we're working with or against one of their four basic needs. And they have a food need, a need for socialization, and that socialization need could be something as even socializing with cats, interspecies socialization, as well as dogs and people. They have a need, what we call prey kill or prey drive, and that's the need to run after things and bite on them, which a lot of times in dogs like German Shepherd, which is why they bite on you. And finally, they have a need to avoid, eliminate, um, discomfort and pain. So every dog is different on how those needs are stacked. And you may have a dog that has a really, really high prey kill and wants to chase down everything and bite on it. And those are dogs that we oftentimes take into police work or military work. And they may have a very, very low pain threshold and that nothing hurts them. So nothing is ever going to discourage them. Vice versa, you may have a dog that wants to socialize with the people and be around people all the time. And you can hurt their feelings. They're so gentle and fragile that you can hurt their feelings even. So it's a difficult thing. Try to get to understand your dog based on what those needs are, and then try to find a trainer or a behaviorist that can help you understand that dog and have a relationship with the dog that will help you work through and get a good trained dog.
I want to turn back over to our callers. I have a Ron from Henderson. He has a question about big dogs and small dogs. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking my question. We have a small dog. He's part Chihuahua Dachshund, and his name is Oscar. We really like labs and have had labs all of our lives, but have not had one for quite some time. We want to do adopt a Labrador. Oscar is an adopted dog, but we're curious about the big dog, small dog combination. We've heard that it doesn't work, or other people will say, hey, we did it and it works fine. Before we do this, we want to get maybe some really good advice on what you see as a history of this, or a pattern, or what can we do to make it work.
I'm going to turn this question over to Christy Deneff with the Animal Foundation. Christy, can you share your thoughts on the big dog, small dog combo?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for adopting. That's so lovely that you have and want to again. I would never advise against it necessarily. Honestly, it would 100% be up to those specific dogs. So my first recommendation would be just make sure that you know what Oscar is, what his preferences are already. I don't know if he already knows big dogs, but you probably would want to just know a little bit about his preferences. If he's really active, maybe he wants another dog that would be really active with him. If he's not really active, maybe a really active dog coming into the mix might not be the best fit for him. So I would first check with Oscar, and that would be the same for the lab that you are adopting. My guess is that they'll probably be pretty active, so you might want to take that into consideration. And then I would say the second thing is setting them up for success from the very first meeting. So making sure that you're really prepared to introduce those dogs and then moderate sort of those interactions to make sure that they build a good relationship from the start. So I think those would be my two biggest first recommendations in making sure that you can have a successful pairing of a big dog and a small dog.
We have a fantastic panel of guests on with us today. And one of those guests is veterinarian Dr. Shadi Arafij. And Dr., I do have a question for you. It's about the holidays. You know, many of us like to go away to see families and friends, and there's that hard decision or conversation between pet owners of whether or not to take their pets with them on vacation, to board them, or sometimes if they're only gone for 1 or 2 days, they leave them at home with a self-feeder. I want to know your thoughts on this and kind of what's the best mode for navigating this holiday season.
It really does depend on your pet's personality. So, for example, we can start off with behavior. If you know your pet is prone to separation anxiety, and anytime you leave the home to even go to work or out to dinner and you risk your pet destroying your house, then that's the kind of pet that maybe should either go with you, or you should try and find an environment conducive to that behavior before you leave. Make sure you have a plan in place, and then once you do go away, have that plan take into effect, and that way you can minimize that pet's anxiety while you're gone. So that's a good example of how both plans can work depending on how much effort you want to put into trying to salvage the situation. The personality aspect of pets really is a big deal, but of course then you have the convenience aspect. It is where you're traveling to conducive to having a pet. Flight versus driving, hotel versus somebody's home. Where are you staying? What do you have access to as far as food? Do you have veterinary care where you're going, or you're visiting a more rural area? Those are all aspects to it that you want to make sure that you have planned out before making that kind of decision. Secondarily, if you are planning on leaving your pet home when you go away, then boarding facilities, having the pet stay at a friend's house, having a friend come over your house, take care of the pet, or having a dog sitter or a cat sitter hired to come over. These are different aspects to it that are probably better than just having a feeder with a timer on it at home while you're gone, because you want to have eyeballs on that pet. You want to make sure that there are no issues. So you can set up video surveillance as well if where you're going has access to internet, so you can watch your pet from home remotely. These are all kind of cool ideas you can consider.
For someone who's maybe a first time leaving their pet at home with a self feeder, does the pet typically tend to overeat for those first few times that it's allowed to?
It really depends on the pet. There are some pets that will not eat while the pet owner is away, and then once you return home, they're so happy to see you, then they feel back to normal again. And there are others that really don't care. They'll eat if it's in front of them. Also, don't forget, too, that if you're using a feeder, especially if it's got a timer attached to it, these things can break. And so the last thing you want to do is have the machine break, and now it's not releasing any food at all, and unbeknownst to you. So keep that in mind as well. But it really does depend on the pet's personality, how they're going to handle food while you're gone.
And now I'm going to turn the conversation to Caroline from Henderson. She has an animal that is coughing. Caroline, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you.
What's your question?
I have a little male Yorkie. He's 14 years old. He's very perky. He eats, drinks, barks, carries on just like a regular little dog. And he has a growth in his throat, which was found when we had some dental work done. We've taken him to two different one animal hospital and another vet that has a hospital also. And no one wants to really remove it because it's in an area where there's a lot of nerves and veins, and they're afraid, I guess, to do that. And also, I'm a little concerned about anesthesia at that age. He seems to be fine, except that this little mass, I guess, is continuing to grow. There was a little biopsy done, and it was non-cancerous. So his cough is getting tighter. You can hear it when he barks. He doesn't bark as well as he used to. Also, when he coughs like he has something stuck in his throat, and then he gags, but nothing comes up. So what I'm trying to find out, is there anything we can do to shrink that mass? Should we really consider surgery, or what can we do about this?
Caroline, I'm so sorry to hear that about your dog. Dr. Rafage, what are your thoughts?
A lot to unpack there. First of all, let's talk about coughing in general. So there's two broad categories as to why dogs will cough, medically speaking. One is either related to the cardiovascular system. The second is related to respiratory system. There are other categories, of course, but those are two common ones, especially in a 14-year-old small breed dog. They are prone to having both of those conditions, cardiovascular and respiratory. So we want to figure that out. The second question is the coughing actually related to the mass itself, either directly or indirectly? So it depends. When you say it's in the throat, it kind of depends on what aspect of the throat we're talking about here, whether it's related or not. Third, in regard to clearly delineating whether or not this is something that's amenable to surgical removal because it seems to be encroaching upon nerves and vessels, you may want to consider advanced imaging, CAT scan or MRI. CAT scans are really great because you can perform the imaging with minimal sedation, so it's fairly quick, and that way it minimizes the anesthetic risk to the patient, and that can help with surgical planning. Assuming of course cost is not an issue for you, and you can find a facility that has CAT scans. Then in regards to anesthesia and surgery in a pet who's older, the biopsy showing that this is benign, hopefully that's correct. Sometimes it's not correct, it just depends. But regardless, if it's causing a problem and it's related to quality of life and causing issues, it's coughing, then it might be worth removing. Young dogs don't get masses, older dogs do. And so when you talk about anesthetic risk, every patient in that population who are getting masses removed with surgery are similar age. And so they're all kind of across the board going to be older. It's up to the veterinarian to perform blood work, x-rays, ultrasound to make sure that your pet is systemically healthy to handle anesthesia. After that, it's a matter of hoping for the best with anesthesia. If you think the mess is causing a quality of life issue, then it typically is worth removing it. Understanding, of course, that despite the best efforts of the veterinarian with all the testing, anesthesia is not 100%, and scary things can happen under anesthesia. But you have to weigh the pros and cons, risks and benefit of it. So all those questions have to be addressed before you can make an intelligent decision on what to do next.
Caroline, I hope that kind of gives you the information that you need to make an informed decision. I want to go to Lucy from Las Vegas, and she has a question for Master Dog Trainer Gregory. Lucy, what is your question?
I was curious. He mentioned something about protection training, and I'm not sure what that all entails. I have a Weimaraner, and I was wondering what does it require for a dog to be protection trained?
Okay, Master Dog Trainer Gregory, what does it take to train a dog to be protective of its owner?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for calling in. The thing that I'd like to help people understand when it comes to protection dogs is that most dogs in and of themselves are protection dogs to a degree. In other words, if your dog barks when they hear something outside, they're trying to protect you by telling you that there's somebody outside. Now, a lot of times we mistake and think that in order to get a good protection dog, we have to get a dog that has police dog type of breeding. And really, those are the worst dogs to get for the average citizen for protection, because those dogs are wired and bred to do hardcore police work. So your Weimaraner is possibly, if he barks already or she barks already, she's trying to protect you. So what a trainer like myself would do is teach your dog the parameters of when it's time to do the barking at people, and to let it know that it only has permission to do barking and aggressive behavior at people under certain circumstances. And we teach them what those circumstances and parameters are. And this can be any dog from a Chihuahua. I trained Chihuahuas for personal protection. I've trained Border Collies, all kinds of dogs. And they don't necessarily have to be a particular breed. And I've trained Weimaraners, and they make really great protection dogs.
Lucy, I hope that answers your question. I do have a question for you, Master Dog Trainer Gregory. Have you ever been confronted with a dog that just would not go through with the protective training, was maybe just too sweet and too kind that it just did not want to do it?
Typically, I have a really, really high success rate as long as I don't put expectations of the dog for doing more than what it's capable of doing. Much like, understand that if you send your child to karate class or jiu-jitsu class, it's not necessarily saying that he or she is going to end up in the UFC. But can they learn to protect themselves? Yes. The same thing happens with dogs. Even if what we're teaching the dog is just that it's okay to bark at somebody who's trying to hurt mommy or daddy or the children, that's still a form of protection.
Christy Deneff of the Animal Foundation, I have an adoption question for you. I've heard stories of 70-year-olds falling and maybe seriously hurting themselves because of larger dogs running into them. It might be a larger puppy or something that they were given a dog, or they're taking care of a family's dog for the weekend. And I wonder, what's your recommendation for older individuals who might be looking to adopt a bigger animal?
Well, that would definitely be a case-by-case basis based on the person and the dog. So that again is something that, if you're adopting from a shelter, I'd recommend adopting from a shelter, because we can help identify, again, the lifestyle, the preferences of the people, and then really match them with the right dogs for them. I can't say that, an active dog or a big dog wouldn't be the right fit for an older adopter. That's definitely, again, on a case-by-case basis, but we can really make sure that we are making those right matches and really putting the time and effort into setting up the right dog with the right people, and making sure that they have all of the tools that they need so that there aren't injuries or trouble settling into the home. And again, that's something that probably a shelter or a rescue group can help more than another source of obtaining a dog as well.
I have a question from a listener for you, Christy, and it asks, is there a perfect pet, or is there a perfect owner? Pet owner. I think they wanna know, is there a perfect mix for the two, or will there always be imperfections between the relationship that need to be worked out?
I think every pet owner has to decide for themselves, again, what it is they're looking for, what would be the right match for them. But I like to think that every pet owner is the perfect pet owner for the perfect pet that they have. Again, want to make sure we're making the right matches, but just because somebody does something differently with their pet than I would do with my pet, that's not up to me to judge. We just want to make sure that they have all of the information, the resources, the support that they need to be their perfect pet parent.
Dr. Shadia Arafij, I have a question that's related to separation anxiety, and this person wants to know, have you ever heard of giving a pet CBD gummies to help with separation anxiety or some sort of CBD product?
We don't have any official recommendations as far as dosing or products for CBD yet, although anecdotally speaking, I know many pet parents that are using CBD and CBD-type products to help with their pets with a variety of conditions, everything from epilepsy to behavior management to chronic pain. So it seems to be working fairly well. Just, of course, do your due diligence, make sure that you research the topics, because it's still something that's heavily under investigation with regards to balancing both the legal aspects in some states, and, of course, you want to have some science to back it up. That being said, in reference to actual gummies, xylitol, spelled Xylitol, xylitol is an artificial sweetener that a lot of you out there may already know this is incredibly toxic for animals. And so you want to make sure that any product you use, whether it's CBD or something else that's tied into some kind of edible formulation, that it does not have xylitol. Xylitol toxicity is very common and very serious. So just make sure you do the research regarding that as well before you offer any type of product like that to your pet.
I want to turn the conversation to Tracy from Las Vegas. She has a question about dogs and protection. Tracy, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I did call earlier.
So hi again. What's your question?
But this one is about my dog. It's a little mixed breed, probably Chihuahua mix, also rescue. But he is protected. He's typically kind of quiet and timid. But if anyone knocks on the door or a package is delivered, he goes ballistic. So how can we control that? I mean, he's doing his job, but it kind of goes overboard.
Okay, this is a question for Master Dog Trainer Gregory. What are your thoughts for trying to get the dog not to go crazy when someone's at the door?
Okay. Well, the first thing is my question would be do you want your dog to let you know there's somebody at the door or prowling around? So if that is the case, that our first response is that, yes, I got a dog, so my dog will alert me. Then we want to make sure that we don't tell the dog no or bad dog. We want to tell the dog good dog first, and then get control over the dog by putting a leash and collar on the dog, so you can keep the dog in a controlled state until the people come in, and then he realizes that, okay, these people are being invited in, and I can shut it down. By once again putting the controlling device on them, the collar and the leash, you're able to get that aggression shut down a lot quicker than if you were to just allow them to be free, because you can communicate with them that, oh, yes, I thank you so much. I appreciate your telling me, because a lot of times they keep barking because they keep screaming at you. There's somebody at the door. There's somebody at the door. There's somebody at the door, and they think you don't hear them. So if you make this a practice each time, they'll start to realize that, oh, you heard me, and they'll shut it down.
Tracy, I hope that answers your question. I want to take a call from Kelly from Las Vegas. Kelly, what's your question?
Yes, my question is for the Master Dog Trainer regarding a certain collar that trainers use it's a metal with like spikes on it. And I've just read some controversy about those, but I'd love his opinion. My daughter had her very obnoxious dog trained with that saw some results, but she read something that they were cruel, and so she took it off her dog. And it is the worst behaved dog ever. It's an 80-pound dog, and it just jumps up on people. And I would love to encourage her to start using that again and even maybe refresh the training with this trainer she used. So I'd love his opinion on that.
Master Dog Trainer Gregory, we have about 40 seconds for this answer. What is your thoughts?
The collar was created originally from my understanding by the veterinarian is meant to be imitation of the biting of an older dog onto a younger dog around the neck just to control. Just understand that it's a tool, and just like any tool that you may pick up at a hardware store, it could be misused, and you can hurt somebody with it. You can hurt somebody with a hammer, a saw, etc. And therefore, the misuse of a tool, even in the case of a collar, a training collar of some type, can cause damage to a dog. So make sure that whoever is using that also gets the proper instruction on how to use it.
Thank you so much for calling in, Kelly. That was Master Dog Trainer Gregory. He is with the Dog Training Center. We also had on with us today Dr. Shadi Arafij. He's a veterinarian and the owner of VetTriage.com, and Christy Deneff, who is the director of life-saving programs with the Animal Foundation. I'd like to thank all three of them for being on with us, and thank you for everyone who called and wrote into today's show.
On the charter bus, another adult from the charter bus died.